Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello everybody and welcome to this special crossover podcast between the team at the Daily Newcastle podcast and our counterparts at the Daily Wolverhampton Wanderers podcast. My name is Michael Grimslow and I'll be your host for this episode. And if you can't tell by the accent, I sit firmly in the Team Toon camp. But I'm not the only magpie on this call, as I'm also joined by Ian Mackay. How's it going, Ian?
It's going great, Michael. Good to see you.
Absolutely fantastic. You too. And of course, we are joined by two of Wolverhampton's finest. Firstly, it's Chris McIntosh. How's it going, Chris?
Hello, living the dream as always, living the Vitor Pereira dream.
Oh, the Vitor Pereira dream. Now, we'll get a bit more into that later. And we're also now joined by Nathan Edgerton. How's it going, Nathan?
Evening, everyone. Evening. Very well, thank you. Very, very well. I cannot complain one bit.
Cracking stuff. If anyone hasn't clicked yet, we're here because Newcastle United host Wolverhampton Wanderers on Wednesday evening. And it's safe to say both camps are a little bit more optimistic than what they were for the reverse fixture. We'll start with Wolves, Nathan. It was a tough start of the campaign for you. And subsequently, you had a little bit of a change. Getting rid of, of Gary O'Neill and replacing him with Vitor Pereira. Now, what were your initial thoughts on O'Neill's departure, and has anything changed since the appointment of Pereira?
Yeah, I mean, a load has changed. I think his arrival to Wolves has been the best thing that's happened to us this season, quite clearly. I mean, the results have had a quick change, but the main thing that we've noticed is just the different approach to games and the positivity that we seem to have around the group. And I know some people will quickly kind of label it as the manager bounce, but there's also quite clearly a lot of tactical adjustments that he's made that have been more suited to that group of players. And yeah, the Gary O'Neill sacking was long overdue. I think I'm not the only one in a Wolves shirt that will think the same. So long overdue, but we've welcomed Vitor in, and he's done a good job so far for us. We've seen some positive things, so long may his reign continue.
Absolutely fantastic. And Chris, we saw a little bit of distastefulness towards Gary O'Neill. There was a little bit from O'Neill back to the fans. It was quite clear to see. Why was the reason for that? Was it just results, or was there a lot? So you think there was more going on?
It was a combination of things. The results definitely, because if you look back, not just this season, but the end of last, it was a long period of defeats. And with very few points on the board. And then on top of that, just more and more, he felt like a rabbit in the headlights. I mean, and stuff he was saying in post-matches. Like at one point he said he was dealing with a squad that hadn't got much Premier League experience. But there was actually, if you look at our starting lineup, you look at the likes of Jose Sarr and Semedo and Doherty and like all these people with massive amounts of Premier League experience in them. Yes, there was some youngsters scattered about, but there was still a lot of people there. Cunha's been with us for a couple of seasons. It's not like there was loads of youngsters, and they're just the things that were coming out and playing people out of position all the time, saying that people weren't good enough. It just felt like, yeah, the longer it went on, I'm all for giving people chances, and I probably sat on the fence a lot longer than many people. But by the end, it was too late, if anything.
Yeah, from the outside looking in, it definitely looked like something wasn't adding up because the results. The club is so much better than the results were showing. But Ian, on the Newcastle side, would you say that, well, it's been 8 wins in a row for the Magpies. We're playing very good football, significantly better than we were when we played Wolves the first time around. Would you say this is up there with the best version of Newcastle United we've seen under Eddie Howe?
I think so. I think it's definitely developed, and it's the best team that we've got. I think the inclusion of Sandro Tonali as a number 6 and getting Bruno Guimaraes to play forward has certainly given us a much sharper cutting edge. And playing players in the positions that they really want to play in has given us a massive difference. I think that's the difference between our indifferent start and certainly from the Liverpool game, how well balanced we've looked. Maybe down to just including a right winger in the right wing position instead of trying to reinvent Joe Linton, Anthony Gordon and Harvey Barnes even as the right winger. But I just think that gives us an attack down both sides, and that gives opposition defences twice as much to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, but I do think we've developed. I think Tonali's new this year. He barely played last year before he was banned, and we know Premier League might not have accepted it quite yet, but they will do by the end of the season that Tonali is world class. Ask anyone at AC Milan,
100%.
they'll tell you that he's world class.
Yeah, 100%. He's definitely one of our best players, and him alongside Bruno Guimaraes, it almost feels a bit like a cheat code for us, because I've heard stories about the likes of Rob Lee, etc. I don't remember them. I was a bit too young, and it almost, the way those were idolized by my dad and stuff like that, that's sort of what I feel I'm going to be like with Tonali and Bruno in 10, 15 years' time when I have kids. I probably won't wait that long. That sounds horrible. But at the same time, it's one of those where you're looking at those sort of iconic players, and if they stay at Newcastle for sustained periods, they could well be two of the best centre midfielders that we've ever had. But just wanted to touch on there as well. We spoke a lot about a change in fortune for Newcastle coming from playing players in their more natural position. Now, we also saw in the summer, England was struggling because they were playing the likes of Foden, etc. out of position. From the conversations we were having at the start of the pod, I believe that was a similar issue that Gary O'Neill was having at Wolves. Is that correct?
Nathan, do you want to go with that one?
Yeah, sure. I think he was chopping and changing a lot week on week, and things weren't going well, so something did have to change. But as you said, I think Chris said it before we came on air, it's just the round pegs in round holes situation. When you've got players that are doing something well for a prolonged period of time in the Prem in a certain position, just keep them to that position. If it ain't broke, why fix it? So I think players like Mario Lemina, who was often, yes, he does have the physical attributes and some of the experience to play in various different positions. He was played at centre half under Gary O'Neill, and he had an all right game against Fulham. And then in the next game, he was played again at centre half, and it's almost like you've got fit centre halves on the bench with plenty of Premier League experience. If you're having to play a midfielder at centre half, it should only be in an emergency situation. Yeah. But don't persist with it just because he's had a one-off good game. When we know he's a centre mid, and we're seeing it now where Vitor Pereira's come in and he's made just some slight adjustments where, Matt Doherty, who's lost a bit of pace, is instead of playing wing back, he's now playing as a right-sided centre half, and he's got that experience in the back five, and formation-wise, it just works. And going forwards as well, just playing players in the positions that they used to play in, and not trying to sort of force people into the starting lineup because they're on a good reign of form. I don't know. It felt a bit forced under O'Neill, and now just feels like it's flowing a bit more.
Yeah, if I can follow up on that, just because it also felt at times like he lacked the courage to make the strong decision to drop people when he needed to. For example, Mario Lemina was made captain in the summer, but then we go and buy Andre, Brazilian starting midfielder, like plays for the national team, outstanding defensive midfielder. And then he was trying to shoehorn João Gomez, Mario Lemina and Andre into like this midfield three that wasn't working, when he clearly just lacked the guts to drop the captain, who was actually the weakest of the three and performing the worst he's performed for us last couple of seasons. Love Mario Lemina. He helps keep us up a couple of seasons ago, but this season all over the place. And there's clear points where it was like, just drop him, play the two who have come in and like suit over, like taken that place over. And sure enough, like Vitor's come in, and now it's two holding midfielders, and Lemina's looking like he might even go in this transfer window because he's struggling to get back in the team. Yes, he's had some injuries, but he's not the guy he was. He's lost the captaincy because he got emotional, kicked off after one match, and so it just seems like he lacked the decisions, the courage sometimes to make the harsh calls, because he wanted to be liked by the players.
Yeah, 100%.
I was just wincing a little bit there when you mentioned Matt Doherty, because I had a flashback. How long ago is it? His first session with Wolves, because he went
14 years ago. He's just hit his 14-year anniversary. Yeah,
right. He scored a last-minute winner with a header.
Yeah,
at St James's Park. That was a long time ago. That might have been Rafa times, was it, or even before that?
Bruce. It might have been, but it was definitely around that era. It was horrible times.
Yeah,
yeah. He's been
such
a great
good header as well.
Club.
Such a good goal for an injury time goal. Well worked.
And that's another thing that's helped with him moving into the back three while we've needed centre backs, because He is so strong in the air. He's arguably one of our strongest players in the air. We've been leaking goals. We score, and if you look, we're one of the highest scorers in the league, but we're also the worst at conceding. Whereas we've been conceding massively from set pieces, but him coming into the back three, you mentioned he's good in the air. He's good in the air, both boxes. And so it's actually helped shore up that defense a little bit.
Excellent stuff. And I think both teams are sort of showing that fluidity that we maybe weren't seeing when the first game came around. It was very rigid. While I think now we're almost looking at this game and expecting quite an entertaining game. I mean, Wolves fans are maybe a bit more used to it, as you say, one of the top goal scorers, one of the top conceders. But for Newcastle, we've had a lot of pretty dismal 0-0s with Everton 1-0 defeats to Brighton, where we should have scored 2 or 3 goals. And for us, that little change in shape, Ian mentioned it a bit earlier with Tonali coming in and Bruno playing a little bit more advanced. I think we're so much of a better team because of that.
Well, we've got somebody with Bruno who can play a forward ball. He's looking to play a ball through the lines into Isak's feet, behind the fullback into Murphy or into Gordon, and that puts you on the byline there, which is a fabulous place to be for setting up a goal. And we didn't have that in the first half. All of our fancy stuff was being played in front of the teams that we were playing.
Yeah,
we're not as bad as Arsenal and just playing for corners. We never stooped that low, but it's much better now, much better.
100%. And as I mentioned earlier in the season, we're a bit like a daisical, but 2 stunning strikes from Harvey Barnes and Fabian Schär led Newcastle to a quite undeserved comeback victory. How do both sides see this fixture going? Well, we'll find out after this quick advert from Zencastr.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out a clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Absolutely fantastic, Ian. Thank you very much, and welcome back to the special crossover podcast ahead of Newcastle versus Wolves on Wednesday night. Now, I touched briefly on the game earlier in the season, which feels like an age ago. A lot's happened for both teams. But before we go into part 2, I'm just going to give a rundown of the players that are out for both clubs. So for Newcastle, it's Jamal Lascelles, Emil Kraft, Joe Willock, Callum Wilson and Nick Pope are all out injured. And there are some small doubts over the fitness of Alexander Isak and Sven Botman. Ian, would you say, based off what we've seen from Newcastle and Eddie Howe in the past, knocks probably still mean that Isak and Botman will at least feature on Wednesday night?
Yeah, it's hard to second guess them now because they've all played all right. But I think the double performance with Dan Burn and Sven Botman away at Tottenham, then away at Arsenal, and this will be a bit of a shock. I think that means that Fab Schär will be on the bench. I think Botman and Burn will keep their centre-half positions. But,
100%.
We all love Fab Schär, so that could easily be wrong. Now, I didn't know... I heard that Isak was having a rest for the FA Cup match. I was surprised just as soon as Asula scored his wonder goal after about 58 minutes or an hour or something yesterday, which should have given him his confidence to go on and get a couple more. He pulled him straight off.
Yeah.
Without a forward to come on. So I would not be at all surprised if he's still not sure whether Isak's going to be fit or not. Isak might sit on the bench and Asula start, with Isak hopefully able to come on, or the other way around. But I don't think you'll see Isak play 90 minutes on Wednesday. I'd be amazed if he gets to half-time.
Ooh. And on the Wolves side, the injury list is, I'm going to be honest, significantly harder to pronounce than Joe Willock, Callum Wilson and Nick Pope. But I will give it a go. Verson Mosquera, Boubacar Traore, Enzo Gonzalez, Sasa Casadiglic and Totte Gomez are all confirmed to be out. But Craig Dawson, Nelson Semedo and Mario Lemina are all down as doubtful. Or at least that's what I've seen. Is there anyone that I've missed there at all who's out? And how does the fitness of the 3 doubtful players look? Do you think either of them, or any of them, should I say, will get a crack and start on Wednesday?
Yeah.
The notable, sorry, we're just kind of looking at each other there, see who's going. The notable one, I think, is the Lamina situation. We're not too sure what's going on, really. I mean, Vitor Pereira has kind of said, he's got to make his mind up, and we don't know where his head is at. I mean, as we mentioned earlier, he was captain for the first part of the season and then had a bit of an outburst at West Ham. And since then, it's kind of been, his body language around games when he's come on, and he's had a couple of knocks and illness in quotation marks. So, I just wanted to say you did a cracking job on the old pronunciation there. That was very impressive.
Yeah, I tell you what, I didn't realise you had somebody called Barbecue Samara. I wanted him to invite me to his parties. Barbecue Samara, fantastic.
Boubacar Traore.
That's a whoa. Whoever
What I
it
will
was,
say is a couple of names there. I mean, fringe, if that. Enzo, for example, that you mentioned, he's just a youngster. He's not even breached the first team, so it's not really a relative. Kalajdzic, he's been out for a long time with like his third or fourth ACL in however many years. It's ridiculous. Lamina, I think even if he's fit, wouldn't start, as I mentioned, because I think he's a backup now to Andre and João Gomez. For me, the biggest intrigue there is whether Semedo's fit or not, because if Semedo plays, then because we've seen Rodrigo Gomez cover his spot recently while Semedo is out, who's done really well. Ironically, a player that Gary Neal said wasn't for now, was for the future, not ready for the Premiership. Vitor's come in, started playing him. He's played left wing back, he's played right wing back, he's played left wing, and he's done outstanding every time. Whichever wing he's on, he's doing the business. So this youngster is doing the job, to the point that I think if Semedo comes in, it'll be interesting to see if Rodrigo Gomez has arguably earned to start higher up the pitch, because Hwang, I think a lot of the fans would be saying, should be on the bench. I don't think necessarily he will be, but I think he's pushing Hwang for that wing spot at the moment. If he's not needed to cover Semedo, if I'm making any sense, then Rodrigo Gomez could move up front. So front three would potentially be Strand Larsen, Gedge, which is Guedes to anyone who doesn't get the pronunciation, and then Rodrigo Gomez.
Yeah. Where does Cunha fit into that then? Is he not in the front three?
Behind.
Wherever he fancies.
He's like a floating. He wears the number 10 for a reason, and he's given the freedom very much to roam nowadays. Right. So he'll float somewhere in that midfield. Usually
he'll probably become very familiar with Sandro Tonali tomorrow or Wednesday night, I guess, if that's the case.
Yeah, I think we'll try and have Tonali stick to him like glue, but we know how good Cunha is, and we know how easily he can get away from players, so that should be probably the key battle of the game. But Ian, from that game that we had earlier in the season, and probably more of what you've seen from Wolves this season, are there any players that ahead of Wednesday night you're looking at and thinking, they could really cause Newcastle some problems?
I'm just worried about Matt Doherty turning up on the far post in the last minute. No, that's not the only worry I've got. Of course, Cunha is one of the top strikers in the Premier League. He's fantastic. And he's not even a striker. He's number 10. Hwang tends to turn up against us regularly. Although I must admit, I've always admired from afar. When I've seen on this season, I don't know if he's quite there. Has he come back from a really long injury?
He's been in and out. So basically, he hasn't been the same since he went to the Asia Cup last spring.
Right.
Because he went away with Korea at that point. If you remember, Klinsmann was manager, and basically there was loads of trouble with their team. I think they got knocked out of the tournament earlier than expected, and there was a lot of infighting, and apparently he wasn't keeping them very fit. He has not been the same since that. He came back, started the season, then went out with a hamstring, I think it was, for a few weeks. And he's just not quite been the same player. He has scored 2 goals in the last few games, but aside from that, one was a gift, against Man U. It was the late goal, and Cunha basically did all the hard work and just gifted him the winning pass for the goal. And then the other was off a free kick, set piece situation. So, but out in open play, he's still being played. But Nathan, I'm sure you can back me up on this, that I've always been Mr. Positive towards him. I do give him more benefit than some, but I think there's a lot of people calling for him to go back to the bench, as I mentioned, and maybe someone like Gomez take his spot.
Yeah, I think a big thing with Hwang and his form this season is just the competition that we actually have in the positions going forwards. I mean, we mentioned Rodrigo Gomez, who hasn't been given much of a look in, but Gonzalo Guedes this season has been a real bright spark going forwards. Early on, sort of only coming off the bench and a few sort of cup performances, and then he really started to catch the eye, and he's been a big threat going forwards, and I would say consistently putting in sort of 8 out of 10 performances going forwards, like a solid performer for us this season, as well as Strand Larsen, who's been, in my opinion, excellent considering our position in the table and how much defending we've had to do in certain games. And Carlos Forbes has had cameos coming off the bench, and of course Cunha as well. So there's plenty of players in that sort of attacking area where Hwang, when he hasn't been delivering, there's other guys that are there to come in.
Yeah,
he's a very willing target man, Strand Larsen, isn't he?
He's
he reads
great,
the line
and
really
I think
well.
Yeah, and I think that's a big difference as well with Hwang, because last season at points for large periods, Hwang was essentially playing as the number 9 because we didn't have a proper front man, and now we have in Strand Larsen. So Hwang is back to the wings, and potentially that's not, even though he's kind of came in as that player, that's not actually where he's been most successful for us. His double-digit goals last season was playing essentially as the front man, and now he's back out on the wing. But Strand Larsen is, he's fantastic. 7 goals already, a couple of assists in his first season in the Premier League in a team that has been in a relegation battle. He's a brilliant worker.
He's non-stop. That was the last name I was going to put forward to be worried about. He didn't score, obviously, against Forest, but he should have scored 2. I still don't know how either of them were kept out. It wasn't anything that he did wrong. It just incredible point-blank save in particular that I can remember.
He's not scored in a winning game yet, by the way, just so you know that. So if he scores, you've got a chance of
we let him get one in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah,
please do.
I think Strand Larsen is probably one of the reasons why I think the argument will be there for Dan Burn to start over Fabian Schär, like you mentioned earlier. Botman and Burn have had a fantastic sort of relationship as the 2 centre-backs, with Schär being out suspended. But I think when you've got a target man that good in the air, you need your best aerial defender marking them 100% all throughout the entire game. And I think that's Dan Burn. I don't think any defender realistically has more of a chance of keeping them quiet than Dan Burn. But I've got a really bad feeling that we're going to be so worried about the big man that the little number 10 just weaves his way in and out of players and does a little dance before putting it in the back of the net. So that is a worry. I'm going to be honest. I am a little worried about Michael, Wolves offensively.
Both these teams love getting on the front foot. I mean, I think that's one of the major changes, isn't it, since Pereira's come in? Wolves are always looking to move forward. I think we're going to have a great game. I think there'll be goals at either end. I just hope we score one more than Wolves do. Yeah, I'd be happy to watch a 4-3. I'm more than happy.
Yeah.
I mean,
100% Sam.
We're just begging for clean sheets, to be honest. With that conceding that many goals, as much as I love, these entertaining games, I would be so happy for whether it's a boring away from home, because you guys, like you say, you've had a good season. So I'll take away from home a 0-0, a boring 1-0, like 0-0, and stink the place out if it gets us a point, because points are vital for us more than anything. Stay ahead of Ipswich, or even just like a scrappy 1-0 win. It won't be, because we can't. Although we do, saying that, we haven't mentioned, we do have a new central defender. We've already signed one this transfer window. We bought Emmanuel Agbadou. So he played his first game for us this weekend against Bristol City in the Cup. Quite rightly, I think Vitor put him straight in, even only after like 2 days training, because the Cup game was a good chance for him to kind of obviously play alongside people, get some connection with the team outside of the pressures of the Premier League, against the lower league opposition.
How did he do?
I mean, he did well. He played on the left of the central 3, the 3 centre backs. He's big. He's 6 foot something. I can't remember. He's a big, stocky lad. He's strong on the ball. Like, there was a couple of times in the game someone tried to get the ball off him and he wasn't having it. It just basically sent them flying. He's a bit of a beast, but he looks commanding. He's from, is it Rennes? It's pronounced, Nathan, in France. 16 million euros up front. Yeah, 16 million euros up front, or something like that. But yeah, he looks a good piece of work. So we'll see. But obviously, it's going to be his first Premier League game. So it'll be interesting to see how he does against strong opposition.
I don't know if there's a bigger deep end than playing against Isak in your first Premier League game if he does start. Because at the minute, that'll be a test to say the very least.
But he kind of has to start. Sorry?
Ian, is it 8 goals in 8 games for Isak, or is it 9?
Isak, it's 9 and 8.
9.
Well, in fact,
Yes.
it's actually 9 and 7 because he didn't play in the last game.
Oh, yes.
But you mentioned our injuries. So our new signing essentially has been brought in to start. He's like 26, 27, I think. He's a very experienced, plays for Ivory Coast national team. He's actually born in Ivory Coast. And so there's no bones about it. I mean, the one game we had Nori, who's not a centre-back playing at centre-back. He's a left wing-back or arguably our left winger. So he has to start. There's Yosa Mosquera's out. Dawson's doubtful and has been carrying injuries all season. There is a reason Doc has moved into the back three. So this new signing is going straight in the fire. That's pretty much it.
Nori was a player I forgot, but I quite like him. He's very good going forward if he's given the space, isn't he?
Yeah, he loves to go wandering, which is the problem at the back sometimes.
Yes, you're a glass half empty man, aren't you, Chris?
We've been through it this season. I'm sorry, we've been through it. You just look at our position,
I get it. Absolutely.
You mentioned Alexander Isak a little bit earlier. Are there any other players that you are slightly worried about going into the game who you think might be able to control and dominate the game?
My big one's actually Bruno Guimaraes. I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how he matches up against Andre and João Gomez, because you guys tend to play a 3 in midfield if I'm not wrong.
Correct.
So with our 2, and it's very clear under Vitor Pereira that he wants those 2 CDMs just sat there protecting the back 3. It'll be really interesting to see where your midfield decide to pick up space, and I can see it being a bit cagey at first and both teams trying to feel each other out, but Guimaraes, João Gomez, Joel Linton and Andre, they know each other so well. So there's going to be it'll be an interesting battle, and I think that's where the game ultimately probably will be decided, who can get the ball to their most creative players.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. And that's our thoughts on the Danger Men for the 2 sides. And in part 3, we'll get into our final predictions for the game. But for now, we've got another advert from the Global Sports Podcast Network. The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasting with dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, and a dedicated Premier League wrap-up in 5 languages. This is your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find the GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts. And I will say myself, that was a brilliant, brilliant advert, Michael. Thank you very much. You're brilliant, you're gorgeous, the lot. And welcome back to the daily Newcastle and Wolves crossover. That was a lot of me talking, so we're going to quickly move to our predictions. We'll start on the Wolves side with Chris, then we'll move to Ian, then to Nathan, and I will finish us off. So, Chris, start us off. What are the expectations of Wolves fans going into the game, and how can you see it panning out?
Man, I think I kind of touched on it a little bit already. This is a really tough run we're going into for us because we've got, I can't remember the order, but in the space of a few short games, we've got you guys, Arsenal, Liverpool, like it's all back to back. So we need whatever we can get, which is why I said I'll be grateful for. I see goals, like you mentioned. I think there's going to be goals in this either way. We're always capable of scoring. Like we pretty much always manage to score no matter the outcome. So, but given that we've got a new defender, some new combinations at the back, and we're still trying to shore up shop from set pieces. I'll take a 1-1, to be honest with you.
Okay. And what interesting. So what are you thinking, Ian? We know Newcastle fans are confident going into the game, but is there potentially a worry of overconfidence, and how do you see the game going?
I don't think there's a lot that are ready to be overconfident yet, because we've lived through the first part of the season. We turned up overconfident to play West Ham and got turned over. I do think there'll be goals. I think Wolves will score. But I'm going to go with my old favourite, the Old Faithful. Oh. The score that I back every week, except I haven't backed the last 3 times that we've won this score. I'm going to go for 3-1. I didn't do 3-1 against Bromley. Come on. I was on.
We expected a bit more.
I was on 6 or 7-0 or something on that one, but what could you do? 3-1 for me.
And then when they scored.
That was 3-1. A shock. That was a shock.
Nathan, do you agree with Chris's thought for a 1-1, or at least a draw, or are you leaning maybe a different way?
I'm going to try and be the really optimistic one. Usually Chris is carrying that baton, but I'm going to go for a 2-1 away win for the Wolves. I can see us scoring, and I can't see us not conceding. So, yeah, hoping that the new lad has a good run out at the back and can keep Isaac quiet-ish.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think to be honest, it's going to be very interesting to see how he plays. Ian?
Matt Doherty will be at least 10-1 to score at any time. You heard it here first, right?
Get to the bookies.
Matt Doherty going to be in my nightmares once again.
Do you want to join our podcast, Ian, so you can just come and wax lyrical about Doc anytime you want? Because that'd be
I'm more than happy. It's part of my talking about him is part of my aversion therapy, because I still haven't got over to taking my little lad. He was only 7 or 8. His first Newcastle match. As Matt Doherty scoring in the bloody injury time, he was in tears. I was in tears. He was devastated. What can you do?
Doc,
well, hopefully there's not a repeat of that.
No.
I'll take it. I'm sorry, Ian, but if you end up in tears again because Doc scores a late, far post winner or something, I'm gonna be on cloud 9.
I get why.
To be honest, Michael's prediction is probably going to be a heavier defeat than 2-1, because he's another glass half empty man, aren't you, Michael?
Well, I was actually going to surprise all of you. I am more nervous for this game than I was for Man United and Spurs, but I did predict us to win against them quite comfortably. I expected more of Man United and probably less of Tottenham because they gave us a great game. But Wolves have never kept a clean sheet in the Premier League against Newcastle in the Premier League, should I say. You did in the Championship, but not in the Premier League. In the last 3 games, we've won by a combined scoreline of 6-1. But Wolves are very much improving. And I think there'll be a...
Referees have helped, so I'll remember that goalie pulling down Jimenez.
We've all had whinges. We didn't complain. We'll remember Longstaff being pulled down as well. No one talks about that one, though. And I think, to be honest, it'll be one of those where it'll be really tight for a large portion of the game. But I do think that we'll end up running away with it, and I do think it'll be a 4-1. I do think that it'll probably be 2-1 at half time, and we'll get the third while Wolves are having the better of the game. I do think Wolves will have the better of the game through the middle, and I do think we'll struggle to an extent, but I think once we get in the ascendancy, there's very few teams that can stop us at the minute. But whatever happens, the trajectory for both clubs is back on the up, and that's ultimately reason enough to be positive ahead of Wednesday's game. Which of us will be smiling at the end? Well, we've mentioned tears, but, well, hopefully there's no tears from any of us, and it's just a really, really good game. But if there is, what will be, will be. And for now, that's goodbye from us.
Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network. Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.